So I want to talk about today something that we have been focusing not so much on. We've talked a lot about the digital technology, but what about people? And what is the impact that that technology is having on our people? So let me start first with a question. And I know there's a digital audience out there, and I'm sorry I'm not being able to see the raise of your hands out there, but welcome to the digital audience as well who's watching online. The first question is, when was your last upgrade? Good question. If you're thinking about your phone, that was probably 2 days ago if you've got an iOS operating system on your iPhone. But what about in here? What's changed in here? Essentially, our brains have not changed for the last 200,000 years. So we have had an absolute warp speed change in the way we are working, in the technology, with a brain which is still adjusting to a social world pre that, but actually dates back many of the ways we behave to hundreds of thousands of years ago. And understanding that will help us understand some of the challenges we're facing. So in your organization, let me ask another question. You put up your hand. How many of you think that the productivity of your workplace or your personal productivity if you work alone, how many of you think that you are more productive now than you were previously? So give me a more productive. So I'm seeing around about, a half the audience here saying they feel more productive. How many people think that their productivity is about the same? They're no worse, they're no less? In a show of hands. Oh, very few people. And how many people think they're less productive? And so we get pretty much the other half and a group of people who obviously don't know whether they're about their productivity. So what has happened, we've seen that over time with the pandemic, you would think we've always thought about change in organizations as being disruptive of lowering productivity. So what's different this time? It's a massive amount of organizational change which has happened, but we haven't seen productivity go lower. So why is that? Well, I think we have to look behind the productivity statistics and in more detail. And one thing to look at in more detail is what type of work we're doing. If you're doing individual work, so work that only relies on your brain alone, most people are finding that's more productive. 76% of people in the survey that was run by the Boston Consulting Group across a number of countries are showing that they are more productive on that. However, what the challenge is that socially connected work, that work that requires a team, that requires brainstorming, which requires creativity and coming up with new ideas. So it depends on your business. What does your business rely on? Does it rely on the individual brilliance of a single person or their administration or just chonking through reports? Then productivity may have increased. Or does it rely on ideas and innovation and thoughts from a group of people working together? Then productivity could be a challenge. But also what we're seeing is the whole productivity statistic is muddled by longer hours. Most of you will know that productivity is the costs that it takes to deliver a good and service. But if you're in the tech sector where most people are paid on a salary, you're not seeing the increased cost, despite the fact that on average, people are working nearly an additional hour a day. They're also in 148% more meetings than they used to be. They have got 3 times more emails than they used to have pre-lockdown. Their chats are up 45%. So basically, we're seeing that it is incredibly challenged now with a huge amount of information which is coming in to be able to continue to collaborate and work together. But what's contributing to the lower social collaborative work and lowering that productivity in that work? It's 4 factors here. Anybody want to hazard a guess about what those 4 factors would be? You might be thinking that it has something to do with technology. But interestingly, when we look at that, social connectivity. And we'll look at that in more detail. But basically, people in the survey that I was talking about felt that they were less able to get work done when they were less socially connected. So 3.2 times less difference was between people who were less socially connected were much more likely to be lower in productivity. The next factor, mental well-being. So if you have poor mental well-being, so it was in a poorer state, not surprising with the anxiety which is going on, then you'll see basically 2 times lower productivity. Then comes physical health, and 4th on the list was technology. So thinking about that, a whole lot of new technology has come in, and I'm sure lots of organizations are thinking about rapidly changing that. As we say, every 2 days. Just in 2 days ago, new technology, new tools, new ways of working. But the actual difference to whether remote work is working well is on social connectivity, and mental well-being is having a bigger impact. So let's have a look at social connectivity and what are the reasons why it has such a big impact on our productivity. And it goes without saying, work is more than work. There's nothing that's been shown to us more than the pandemic. Then our organizations are actually social places where we connect with other people. But we don't just connect, which makes us feel good, which is extremely important because, as I said, our 200,000-old brains, we were always parts of tribes, and so connection is important to us. But this connection was also how we got work done. So people without that social connection are struggling, and those people can be new people. Let me tell you a story about my friend Maria, who was a senior consultant in one of the big firms that I'm sure you could guess the name of because there's 4 of those big firms, and she switches to another big firm in October 2020. Similar work, but different name over the door. Should be easy, you'd think. But of course, you have to understand the culture. And what do consultants have to do? Well, if you're buying a consultant, you want them to come up with great ideas and you want them to fix your problem. But if you are the consultant, what you need to do is you need to get your billable hours because shortly you're out of job if you haven't got any billable hours. She's there in a new organization. There is a system for this. There's a system that says so many people are available with X, Y, Z skill, and these are the projects which are needed, and they should match up with magic, and people should be booked. But as we know, the consultants aren't booked that way. The project managers decide by who they know, who they like, and who they trust, meaning people they have worked for, have worked on their teams before, not the new girl on the block. Our organisations, despite the technology, still work by social relationships. And what we're seeing is that for new people, they're struggling to build those relationships, or people who were never particularly well connected in the organisation, then they are struggling to be able to get their work done. We're also seeing a deepening of silos across organisations. So what's happened is that it seems to be okay to be able to maintain a certain amount of remote relationships with the 6 to 10 people who might be in your close team. But what's much harder is keeping those relationships out there with the broader team, the people that you would have bumped into in the corridor, talked to in the lift, talked to in the toilets, in the kitchen, all those sorts of things. Those isn't happening anymore. So then the silos between different functions and across those complex matrix organisations are just getting deeper. Overall, it's much harder to trust. people, new people, people we don't know. Difficult for salespeople to build up relationships with new people, for new customers, unless you're selling something that everybody wants, like Zoom. And what's the other big challenge at the moment? The other challenge is on mental well-being, as we're saying, hitting whether people are being able to work or not. And you know this, that fried feeling which happens in your head after too many Zoom calls. That is real, and if we go back to our 200,000-year-old brain, that is the exhaustion of trying to read social cues. If you're trying to read a social cue between a screen, which is basically causing you a 1 to 2 second delay. We are such social animals going back for so many years. It's the difference between us and many of our other ancestors way down the line is that we have a highly developed social brain. We can read somebody's expression with less than a half a second and adjust what we are saying without even thinking about it. It's that automatic, and that is the way we are built and we work. And so looking at it through a screen, looking at a gallery of faces sitting in front of us is just extremely stressful. So there's that stress and anxiety of working in a digital technology, but also with people that you may not know or trust because you've never actually met them before. They're new or they're from a different part of the world, and bringing them together. So Zoom fatigue is real. And it's so obvious, back-to-back Zoom calls, the brain is fried. So Microsoft did an interesting experiment. They basically put people that had 4 hours of back-to-back Zoom calls, and they looked at their brain waves. High stress levels. What does that mean? High stress levels, you're not able to concentrate on meetings. You're less engaged in your work. They did the same thing 2 weeks later with a 5-minute break in between. People much less stressed, able to concentrate. So basically what we're seeing is that these technology itself, it's not just the pandemic, the stress of the pandemic, and that's not going away when the pandemic goes away. Overall, it's much harder to stay focused. There are distractions while you're working from home, kids, pets, and there is so much more technology. How many different channels do you have to communicate with your people at work? How many are WhatsApp, Slack, email, Zoom or whatever video conferencing? It may be a chat associated with your Microsoft Teams. You can easily come up with 10 different ways you connect. And what is the right way to connect, especially to your senior boss? Should you send him or her a WhatsApp with emojis in it? Or is that not quite appropriate? You should put it in the email, but then there's a huge long chain of emails and they'll never see it. So it's hard to stay focused, and it's hard to know how to contact people. What is the right social etiquette? And what we're seeing is the impact is different across different levels. So not surprisingly, with all these distractions, parents at home are suffering a lot more from the distraction, more impact on their mental well-being. But also the younger generations, and if we're not already been talking about generational divide, now we will be. The younger generations are finding it much harder to get integrated into the workplace. They're suffering. They're not going out. They could be either lonely because they're living on their own, or they could be living with some roommates that they didn't intend to ever spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with. So you're finding that working parents are much more stressed, and the younger generation are much less engaged in their work than previously. So where does that leave us with how we lead in this new era? And if it wasn't obvious previously, we need to now start thinking about people. And most of you, I'm sure, will have been aware of various models about being more people-centric. It's not just about getting the task done. But it's different how we relate to people in the digital world, and will continue to. You no longer can sit there. I'm sure you've had a boss, or you are a boss yourself, and said, my door is always open. Come and see me anytime you've got a problem. How do you say that in a digital world? How do you make yourself available and open? Is it by sending you can use my WhatsApp if it's urgent and you need to talk to me? What is the right way to be open and available in a digital world to people? We all know good leadership is often about listening, but how do you listen? Okay, yeah, the video calls you know how to listen, but how many times people are multitasking? And here's an interesting study. If your boss multitasks, then 50% of their staff will also multitask in meetings. So whatever the behavior is, which is set at the top, goes all the way down. But is the new form of listening, is that somebody who thoughtfully reads their emails and takes time to respond? We have such an idea that we need to respond automatically. How many times have you had an email that you've spent hours thinking how to formulate it, and you get back TXS, thanks. Right, okay. Are you really listening? That's not really clear when you get those short answers. You might think that you're being efficient, but are you actually listening? It's so much harder to see emotions. So those people out there watching online, you know, we've got the hello video wave type thing. But otherwise, those emotions are sort of, as I said, behind that screen are much harder. So to be able to express appreciation of a job well done, it has to be so much clearer to people that that is what you're doing. It cannot just be your body language, your tone of voice, which is going to show it. And it's really important to encourage the collaboration. As a leader of a team, you'll be able to see between all the different silos and set people together to make sure that you're including the views of different stakeholders out there, different functions who may need to be involved in a project. So, looking at basically leaders in a digital world, to be able to advance for our teams to be productive, creative, and innovative, I'm going to leave you with 3 thoughts of things that need to be done before I open it up for Q&A. We need to encourage social connection within our teams in a remote world because it's gone and we need it. As people, our 200,000-year-old brain needs that social connection, and that social connection doesn't come easily in a digital world because we are losing so many cues between the screen. We need to make sure mental well-being is a priority because if people aren't mentally well, they're not engaged in their work. There is stress at this end of the scale and engagement at that one. There is a lot of stuff in between where people may be a bit bored or apathetic, but if you want people to be engaged, then you have to deal with the stress and the mental well-being. And you need to invest time in developing people-centric digital leaders. And that is different from just being a people-centric leader, which I'm sure most people hope that they are a people-centric leader, but how do you express that people-centricity through to people in a digital era so that you're available, listening, and supporting people to be able to do the best job when needed? So my next thought is something probably dangerous to say at the Digital Enterprise show, which is all about technology, but in fact, technology is nothing. What's going to make the big impact on our teams and how we work is how we manage our people and how people manage their own well-being. And it's not just me that said that. There was somebody who sadly has passed away, but also said that what's important is to have faith in the people, that they're basically good and smart, give them good tools, and they'll do wonderful things with this. And in addition to that, I would like to add and teach the leaders to be able to manage and work in a digital environment.